The first thing I noticed was the quiet, not the peaceful kind, the kind that hums when something is wrong. When a house that knows your footsteps suddenly pretends it doesn't recognize you anymore. I was standing on my own front porch, Bible still tucked under my arm, Sunday hat crooked from the wind, staring at a lock I did not recognize that silver, shiny, new. I remember blinking, thinking maybe I had walked to the wrong house. Maybe church had drained me more than I realized. But no, there was the little crack in the third step. The wind chime shaped like a cardinal my late husband had hung years ago. The rosebush I never quite managed to keep alive. This was my home, and the key in my hand. No longer fit. Asterisk, before all of this, my life was simple in the way older women learn to appreciate. I'm not saying it was easy, just steady. I'm 62 years old, widowed for 9 years. I worked as a school secretary until my knees told me it was time to slow down. My house wasn't big, but it was paid for. 3 bedrooms, 1 bath, a kitchen that smelled like coffee no matter how often I scrub it at Dot. It was the kind of house where memories settle into the walls. My son, Marcus, grew up there, learned to ride his bike on that cracked driveway, slammed his bedroom door during arguments, and later apologized with awkward hugs. When he married Renee, I told myself I was gaining a daughter. They were young, too young, if I'm honest. Marcus was 31, still figuring out who he was. Renee was 26, sharp-tongued, pretty in a way that made people lean in when she spoke. She had ambition in her walk and impatience in her sighs. They moved fast. Love can do that. When they lost their apartment, Marcus's job hours cut. Rent raised with no warning. They came to me one Tuesday evening, rain still clinging to their jackets. Just for a little while, Marcus said, eyes hopeful in that boyish way he never quite lost. Till we get back on our feet. Renee smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. I didn't hesitate. I never do when it comes to my son. I cleaned out the guest room that night, changed the sheets, made chicken the next day, even though Renee said she was trying to cut back on carbs. I told myself adjustment takes time. Living together always does. At first, it was small things. Renee reorganized my kitchen without asking, said my spices made no sense. She moved my cast iron skillet to a lower cabinet because it was too heavy for someone your age to keep lifting. I laughed it off. Let it go. Asterisk. Then she started correcting me in my own house. Marcus doesn't like his eggs like that anymore, she'd say. Pushing my plate aside. You really shouldn't be drinking coffee so late, she'd add. Glancing at my mug like it offended her, Marcus stayed quiet. He always had when tension entered the room. He'd kiss my cheek before work, promise we'd talk later, and somehow later never came. Sundays were my anchor. I'd been going to the same church for over 30 years. Same pew, same hymns, same women hugging me tight and asking if I was taking care of myself. It was the one place I still felt like myself, not someone's inconvenience or background noise. Renee never came. Said church wasn't her thing. That Sunday morning, I left just like always. Made sure the back door was locked. Waved goodbye to Marcus, who was still in bed. Renee was on the couch, scrolling through her phone, hair wrapped in soak, legs tucked under her. See you later, I said. She nodded, eyes never lifting. Church ran long that day. Pastor Lewis spoke about boundaries, about how kindness doesn't mean surrendering your dignity. I remember thinking how strange it was that his words made my chest ache. When I pulled into my driveway afterward, something felt off. The curtains were different. The ones I kept half open were drawn tight. My wind chime didn't move, even though the breeze was strong enough to lift my skirt. And then I reached the door. I tried my key once. Twice. It scraped uselessly against metal that didn't welcome it. Confused, I knocked. Soft at first, then harder. No answer. I stepped back. heart beginning to beat too fast for a woman my age. I noticed the doorbell camera, another thing I hadn't agreed to, now blinking blue at me like an unblinking eye dot. My phone buzzed. A message from Renee. We need to talk. Please don't make a scene. My knees went weak. I sat down on the porch step, Bible slipping from my lap. I remember the smell of freshly cut grass from next door, the sound of children laughing somewhere down the street. Life moving on while mine sat still. When Marcus finally pulled into the driveway, his face drained the moment he saw me. Mom, you weren't supposed to come back yet, he said. That was the moment I knew, whatever this was. It wasn't a mistake, it was a decision. And it had been made without me, asterisk. Marcus stood there, keys still in his hand, eyes starting between me and the front door like it might explain itself if he stared long enough. What do you mean? I wasn't supposed to come back yet? I asked. My voice surprised me, calm, steady, like I was asking about dinner plans instead of being locked out of my own home. Renee appeared behind him in the doorway. She had changed clothes. Jeans, a pressed blouse, makeup done, as if she prepared for this moment. We told you we needed to talk, she said, crossing her arms. I texted you. I was in church, I replied. You know that. She sighed, the kind of sigh meant to sound patient but carried a sharp edge. Waltz couldn't wait. Marcus cleared his throat. Mom, maybe we should go inside. People are watching. I looked around. Mrs. Jenkins across the street was watering her plants a little longer than necessary. A car slowed as it passed. Yes, I said quietly. Let's go inside. Marcus unlocked the door. The door I used to open without thinking. I followed them in, every step feeling borrowed. The living room looked different. Not rearranged, reclaimed. My framed wedding photo was gone from the side table. The throw blanket my sister crocheted lay folded and tucked away. A new rug covered the worn spot where my husband's recliner used to sit. Before we sold it, Renee gestured for me to sit. I'll stand, I said. Marcus took a breath. Mom, Renee and I have been talking about space, about stability. Renee nodded. This house, it's too much uncertainty the way it is. I waited. Let the silence stretch. Years of raising a child teaches you when to speak and when to let the truth trip over itself. We need consistency, she continued. And legally, this house is in your name alone. If something happened to you, something is happening to me, I said. Right now. Marcus flinched, asterisk. Renee pressed on. We've decided it would be best if we handled the household. For now. I stared at her. Handled it how? She hesitated, just a second. Then, by changing the locks. The words landed flat, like they'd been practiced. You changed the locks, I repeated. While I was at church. Yes, she said. So we could talk without disruption. I turned to my son. Marcus? He looked down. It was supposed to be temporary. Temporary, I echoed. Being locked out of my own house. Renee stepped closer. We're not kicking you out. Not exactly. We just think you should stay with your sister for a bit. Give us time to settle. Figure things out. My chest tightened. My sister lives 3 states away. She shrugged. Or a friend. This house isn't really suitable for all of us long term anyway. I laughed then. A small broken sound. This house raised you. Marcus finally looked up. Mom, please. We just need a chance. Renee's right. We need stability. And where do I fit in? I asked. No one answered. That was the moment something shifted inside me. Not anger. Not yet. Just clarity. I'll get my things, I said. Renee shook her head. We already packed some essentials. The word already echoed. She handed me a tote bag from the hall closet. Inside were a few changes of clothes, my toothbrush, my medication. Nothing else. Thought no photos. No jewelry. No keepsakes. I took the bag. I'll be back for the rest, I said. Renee smiled, thin and controlled. We'll talk about that. I left without another word. I spent the night at a motel off the highway, the kind that smells like bleach and old carpet. I lay awake listening to trucks pass, my bag still unopened at my feet like proof that this was real. In the morning, I called my sister. I didn't cry. I told her I was fine. Then I called a lawyer. His name was Mr. Halverson, soft-spoken, asked questions before offering answers. Did you give them permission to change the locks? He asked. No. Did you sign anything transferring ownership? No. Then, he said gently, they have no right to exclude you from your own property. I closed my eyes. Changing the locks without consent is illegal, he continued. Especially if you reside there? A slow breath filled my lungs. That afternoon, I returned home with him. Renee's face went pale when she saw us. Marcus looked like he'd aged 10 years overnight. This is my attorney, I said. I'm coming home. Mr. Halverson spoke calmly, firmly, explained rights. Explained consequences, Renee argued. Said I was unstable, that I'd agreed verbally to give them space. I did no such thing. I said. The neighbors watched again. This time openly, when the locks were changed back. I stood in my living room and felt the house exhale, but the air between us was different now. The first clue had been subtle. This was confirmation. Whatever Renee had planned, it wasn't over. Renee didn't speak to me for days after that. She moved through the house like a shadow, quiet, stiff, purposeful. Cabinets closed softly where they used to slam. The television volume stayed low. If she needed something, she asked Marcus, never me. Marcus, on the other hand, hovered. Mom, you okay? He asked every morning before work, lingering in the doorway like a child afraid to leave. I'm fine, I told him. And in a way I was. Hurt, yes, but also awake. You don't survive widowhood, decades of work, and raising a son without learning how to steady yourself when the ground shifts. Still, I watched. I noticed how Renee began keeping documents in a folder she carried everywhere. How she made calls in the backyard, pacing, lowering her voice when I stepped outside. How she asked pointed questions about my finances, my pension, my savings, whether the house was fully paid off. I answered vaguely. Trust, once cracked, doesn't shatter loudly. It erodes quietly. One afternoon, while Marcus was at work, Renee sat across from me at the kitchen table. She placed the folder between us. We need to have an adult conversation, she said. I folded my hands. I thought that's what we were doing. She ignored that. This living arrangement isn't sustainable. For whom? I asked. For all of us, she replied quickly. But especially you. I raised an eyebrow. Explain. She slid a paper toward me. A printed article about senior living communities. Highlighted passages. Smiling gray-haired couples walking hand in hand. You deserve peace, she said. Care, support. I have all of that, I replied. Here, she leaned forward. Not really. You're alone most of the day. You forget things. I felt a flicker of heat. I do not forget things. You forgot to pay the water bill last month. It was paid 2 days later. She sighed. That's exactly my point. I pushed the paper back. I'm not going anywhere. Her lips tightened. Then we need to talk about ownership, she said. There it was. What about it? Marcus and I need security. If something happens to you, again with that, I interrupted. She pressed on. We should put the house in all our names. Or at least Marcus's. I stood slowly. This conversation is over. She watched me walk away, eyes cold. That night, I checked my bedroom door before bed. It was still my room familiar dresser, the soft hum of the ceiling fan. My husband's old watch resting on the nightstand, but something told me to be careful. The next week, I noticed my mail had been opened, not all of it, just the bank envelope. I said nothing. Instead, I went to the bank the next day and changed my account settings, added alerts, updated passwords. I visited my lawyer again. Document everything, Mr. Halverson advised. Dates, conversations, changes. So I did. I wrote in a notebook every night. Small details. What was said. How it was said. Who was home. Then one morning, I overheard Renee on the phone. I just need her signature, she whispered. Once that's done, we're safe. My heart pounded. That afternoon, I confronted Marcus. She wants the house, I said plainly. He rubbed his face. She just wants security at my expense. She's scared, Mom. So am I said. And I'm the one being pushed out. He was quiet. 2 days later, I came home from grocery shopping and found the folder on the kitchen counter open. Inside were forms, power of attorney, medical, authorization.property transfer, unsigned, yet, I picked them up with trembling hands. That was the moment betrayal stopped being theoretical. It had weight, paper, intent. I didn't scream. I didn't cry. I took photos. Put everything back exactly as I found it. That evening, I called my pastor and my lawyer and my sister. I didn't tell Renee what I knew. I let her believe I was still the quiet, compliant woman she could manage. Because sometimes the most powerful thing a woman can do is wait. Waiting is harder than acting. Every instinct in me wanted to confront Renee, to slam those papers down on the table and demand an explanation. But grief had taught me something important years ago. When people believe they're winning, they reveal everything. So I stayed quiet. I smiled when appropriate. Cooked dinner when it was my turn. Listened more than I spoke. I watched Renee closely, the way her eyes flicked toward the hallway when I mentioned my lawyer friend from church. How she stiffened whenever the phone rang after dark. Marcus remained caught in the middle, stretched thin by loyalty and love and fear of conflict. He tried to smooth things over, to keep peace where there was none. Let's all just breathe, he said one night, hands raised like a referee. We're family. Family doesn't change locks, I thought. Family doesn't draft papers in secret, but I didn't say it. Instead, I prepared. Mr. Halvorsen helped me file a formal notice of residency and ownership. Quiet paperwork. Clean lines. No drama. My pastor, bless him, arranged for a small church committee to check in on me officially. Just a routine wellness visit, he said with a knowing look, and my sister booked a flight not to rescue me, but to stand with me. Renee noticed the shift. You're making this bigger than it needs to be, she said one evening as I washed dishes. I'm making it clear, I replied. Her jaw tightened. You don't trust me? No, I said calmly. I don't. The next Sunday, church felt different. I sang louder, prayed harder. When Pastor Lewis spoke about wolves in sheep's clothing, I didn't flinch. After service, I spoke to Mrs. Jenkins and a few others. Not gossip, just truth. I had a scare, I said, but I'm handling it. Word travels gently in small communities when you speak with dignity. The confrontation came 3 days later. Renee stood in the living room, folder in hand, Marcus beside her. She looked rehearsed, prepared. We need to talk, she said. I agree, I replied. Taking a seat. She launched into it, how they'd only wanted to protect me. How stress had made her act out of character. How I was misinterpreting things. Then she slid the papers toward me. If you sign these, she said softly, we can move forward. I didn't touch them. I won't, I said. Marcus swallowed. Mom, I've spoken to my lawyer, I continued, and my pastor, and my bank. Renee's eyes widened just slightly. I know what these papers do, I said. And I know you changed the locks illegally. I have proof. Silence fell heavy. You went behind my back, she said, voice sharp. No, I replied. You did. She stood abruptly. Fine. If you won't cooperate, then maybe this isn't the best environment for you. And there it was again. I looked at my son. Marcus, do you agree with her? He hesitated. Too long. That hesitation told me everything. I think, he said carefully, maybe you should consider other options. Something inside me settled. Not shattered, settled. I will, I said. But not the way you think. The next morning, a sheriff's deputy knocked on the door. Renee's face drained of color as he handed her a notice. It wasn't an eviction. It was a restraining order, temporary, limited, but clear. No interference with my property. No financial coercion. No changing locks. No intimidation. She shouted. Accused. Cried. The neighbors watched again. Marcus stood frozen. You did this. Renee hissed at me. No, I said quietly. You did. By the end of the week, they were gone. Suitcases loaded into a friend's car. Renee didn't look back. Marcus hugged me, stiff and unsure. I didn't want it to be like this, he said. Neither did I replied. The house felt hollow afterward. Too quiet, but it was mine. Asterisk, the silence after they left was different from the silence I'd felt on the porch that first Sunday. This one didn't hum with fear. It rested. I walked through the house slowly, touching the backs of chairs, straightening picture frames that had been moved. I stood in the doorway of the guest room, the room I'd cleaned with such hope months earlier, and opened the windows wide. Fresh air rushed in, carrying the smell of rain and cut grass. That night, I slept deeper than I had in weeks. Marcus called 2 days later. I'm staying with a friend, he said. Renee's. Upset, I imagine she is, I replied. He was quiet. I didn't realize how far she was going to take it. I chose my words carefully. You saw the locks, Marcus? He exhaled. I should have stopped it? Yes, I said. You should have. There was no anger in my voice. Just truth. Weeks passed. The restraining order expired, but the message lingered. Renee didn't reach out. Marcus visited occasionally, always alone, always cautious. He noticed the changes, new curtains, my wedding photo back where it belonged, a sense of ownership that hadn't been there before, not just of the house, but of myself. One afternoon, my sister and I sat at the kitchen table drinking tea. You did good, she said. I did what I had to, I replied. Asterisk, she nodded. That's usually what good looks like. Marcus came over that evening. He sat where his father used to sit, hands folded. I've been thinking, he said, about everything. I waited. I let her speak for me, he continued. I let her push you because it was easier than standing up. I looked at him, really looked. The boy I raised, the man he was still learning to be. I love you, I said. But love doesn't mean surrender. Tears filled his eyes. I know. He didn't ask to move back in. I didn't offer. Some lessons need space. Months later, I heard through church friends that Renee told people I'd turned on her, that I'd chosen property over family. I let her tell her story. I knew mine. The house began to feel like home again. I planted new flowers, joined a book club, started volunteering at church on Wednesdays. One Sunday, Pastor Lewis hugged me after service. You held your ground, he said. I held my dignity, I replied. Marcus and I are rebuilding. Slowly, carefully, on new terms. Renee is still part of his life, though not under my roof. And that's okay, because I learned something important. Kindness without boundaries is an invitation to be erased, but boundaries clear, firm, compassionate are how we teach people how to love us. I sit on my porch some evenings now, listening to the wind chime, watching the sun dip behind the houses across the street, the lock on my door, Hasn't changed since, and neither have I asterisk there's a moment. Usually late at night when the house settles, you'd hear the soft click of cooling pipes, the distant bark of a dog, the gentle sway of something hanging in the breeze. That's when I sit back in my chair, wrap my shawl a little tighter around my shoulders, and think about how close I came to losing more than a house. I almost lost myself. For a long time, I thought love meant making room, making excuses, making myself smaller so other people could feel bigger, safer, more comfortable. But love without respect isn't love at all, Dot. It's control wearing a polite face. I don't hate my daughter-in-law. I don't even wish her harm. I understand now that her fear drove her, the way fear often does when people are desperate for security. But fear doesn't give anyone the right to take what isn't theirs, and silence doesn't protect peace, it only delays the truth. If you're listening to this and you feel that quiet hum in your chest, that feeling that something isn't right in your own life, your own family, your own home, please hear me when I say this. You are allowed to protect yourself. You are allowed to say no. You are allowed to stand firm without becoming cruel. Dignity is not loud. Justice doesn't always shout. Sometimes it just changes the lock's back, Dot. So tell me, what would you have done if you were standing on that porch with a key that no longer worked? I read every comment. Your stories matter too, Dot, and if this story spoke to you, if it reminded you that your voice still has weight, that your life still has value, then stay with me. Subscribe. Sit with me a while longer. You're not alone here.